Water is the elixir of life. But water allocation can be a deadly affair. In the Middle East, where temperaments mirror the soaring temperatures and prejudices flow freely, the price of water is sometimes paid in blood. After the State of Israel declared independence in 1948, its leaders put their heads together to develop a water plan that would provide desperately needed fluid for drinking and irrigation purposes. Israel came up with the National Water Carrier Project, a plan to draw water from the Kinneret Lake in its north through a technically challenging network of canals, tunnels, and pipes covering a diversity of terrain and elevations, all the way down Israel's west coast to its populated center and to its parched agricultural south. The Kinneret, also known as the Sea of Galilee, is a picturesque lake in Israel's north, ringed with beaches, meadows, and mountains. It is approximately 35 miles in circumference and 150 feet at its deepest point. It held enough water to meet the demands of Israel's expanding population for decades. However, this wonderful freshwater asset is inherently fragile. It is fed mainly by the waters of the Jordan River, which originates in the gushing springs and tributaries of mountainous Lebanon and Syria. Two rivers are especially critical to the aqua that courses down the Jordan Valley before flowing into Lake Kinneret: the Hasbani in Lebanon and the Banias in Syria. Without these two rivers, the Jordan's waters would drop dramatically. The Kinneret's water level would also drop, and its remaining freshwater would be irreversibly salinized by the salt springs sitting on its bed. While Israel simply wanted to have a drink, their plan drew the ire of her neighbors. Having failed to eradicate Israel in the 1948 War of Independence, the Arab world swore to at least limit her growth and economic success. Israel's water project threatened to severely undermine that goal. When Israel began construction on the national water carrier in July of 1953, the war over water was set in motion. Hostilities emerged in 3 stages that served as stepping stones towards a full-scale Arab-Israeli conflict. As Israel's tractors bit into soil north of the Kinneret, Syrian artillery units roared into action, bombarding the Israeli construction site. Syria demanded that the United Nations intervene against Israel. The Security Council wished to uphold Israel's right to resume work on its water project, but the Soviets vetoed the resolution. Israel modified its plan, moved its construction site further from Syria's border, and its engineers went back to work. But the dispute was just warming up. Syria and Jordan then colluded to divert the Yarmouk River. The Yarmouk would be forced to flow away from Israel and instead supplement the Jordanians' irrigation needs. United States President Eisenhower dispatched Ambassador Eric Johnston to resolve the situation. The result was the 1955 Johnston Plan, a brave attempt at coexistence and water sharing that Israel embraced and that the Arab League unofficially resolved to abide by, at least temporarily. The waves of war were thereby stilled for most of a decade. In 1964, Israel completed the national water carrier. It was 81 miles in length and had taken years to build at the cost of hundreds of millions of Israeli lira. But it was worth every lira. The carrier was capable of funneling an astonishing 19 million gallons of water per hour, an achievement far too great for Israel's Arab neighbors to swallow. The Arab League hastily convened in Cairo. Desperate to wreck Israel's water resource, they devised a reckless plan. The Headwater Diversion Plan called for the reduction of the water carrier's capacity by 35% by diverting its headwaters, both the Hasbani in Lebanon and the Banias in Syria, into the Yarmouk River, deep in Jordanian territory. At the same time, the Arab League clarified that this was not simply a war about liquid, but rather liquidation. Since the existence of Israel is a danger that threatens the Arab nation, the diversion of the Jordan waters by it multiplies the dangers to Arab existence. Accordingly, the Arab states have to prepare, so that if necessary results are not achieved, collective Arab military preparations will constitute the ultimate practical means for the final liquidation of Israel. Israel warned that the headwater diversion plan would infringe on its sovereign rights. In other words, it would be considered an act of war. The Arabs, however, were not opposed to a war. They launched their project, and the skirmishes began. In 1965, there were 3 high-profile border clashes. The Syrian military attacked Israeli farmers and army patrols, and Israel responded by sending tanks and artillery to destroy the Arab heavy earth-moving machines that were working on the diversion plan. The Arab states eventually abandoned their project, but the war over water inspired them to plot a war of extermination against Israel. Hostilities between Israel and Syria spiraled over the next 2 years, with Syria using the Golan Heights to rain artillery upon unprotected Israeli farms and villages in the plains below. In the first quarter of 1967, there were over 270 border incidents of sabotage and attack directed against Israel. A view of the war to come came on April 7th, when Syria fired at Israeli farmers. Israel responded with artillery, and the fight escalated. Israel sent planes against Syrian positions and villages, and in an ensuing aerial dogfight, Israel downed 6 Syrian fighter jets and chased the remainder all the way back to Damascus. Ariel Sharon later observed, "People generally regard June 5, 1967, as the day the Six-Day War began. That is the official date. But in reality, it started 2.5 years earlier, on the day Israel decided to act against the diversion of the Jordan River. In fact, it could be argued that the war began as soon as a parched Israel politely asked the Kinneret for a drink."